The world is a scary place right now. We got the local government watching us. We got foreign governments watching us. We got hackers stealing our identities and our wives looking at our search history. How's a man supposed to watch hentai in peace with all these people jacking into his webcam to spy on him? Then you go to your local coffee shop to pretend to write a novel in public like any hipster over the age of 30 would, hoping and praying that someone will sit next to you and ask you what you're doing so you can respond with a practice speech about writing a YA novel about a teen girl who falls in love with Frankenstein, except Frankenstein is like, you know, super hot. And while you're on that public Wi-Fi, some asshat is installing CrowdStrike software on your computer, and now you keep seeing the blue screen of death. Maybe you're an international spy, and you got all these stolen secrets that you're supposed to get back to your country this instant, but you know that your ISP is keeping tabs on you. Or maybe you're the type of guy who doesn't buy condoms because they're too expensive, and you're more of a gambling man. Then you want Surfshark VPN. With Surfshark, you could feel free to transmit drone strike locations, names of foreign assets, or just watch a movie that's not available in your region without the prying eyes of the global surveillance system watching what you're watching. And you can do all that without breaking the bank. How? Because with a VPN, you connect to one of 3,200 servers in over 100 countries, and all your traffic is encrypted. So even if someone was spying on you, which they are, they wouldn't know what the hell they're looking at. Maybe you like getting stuff for free. Then enter the code STRAT for an extra 4 months on the house for free at surfshark.deals/strat. That's surfshark.deals/strat. And while you're at it, thank them for the sponsor, because without them, I'd be sitting outside your coffee shop begging for nickels. So do yourself a favor. Don't roll dice with your privacy. Get Surfshark for 4 free months with the code STRAT. I had a friend back in the day who was obsessed with Morrowind. See, I had just gotten back recently from the military, and the Afghanistan war was popping off, and I was sitting around the house sweating my ass off, worrying about getting deployed. He'd come over every now and then and let me burn copies of his games because he had a job and I didn't. Now, he preached the gospel of Morrowind, but at that age, I just didn't get it. The story was rich, the lore was deep, and the world building was complex and actually came up in gameplay, but I missed all that because I just didn't see what other people were seeing. I didn't get the hype. The gameplay was actually deeper than most people are still willing to give it credit for. The combat better than people were willing to admit, because for a time, it was trendy to hate it. And still, I didn't get it, because it's not what I was used to and not what I expected out of a first-person game. It subverted my expectations, and I didn't care for that at all. I wanted a first-person, action-oriented game with point-and-click combat, and what I got was stat-based RPG combat. I wanted a game that had dialogue, and what I got was what amounted to wiki entries and info dumps that were spoken verbatim by every NPC, no matter who you were talking to. I wondered why they even bothered having NPCs at all if none of them had personalities. I didn't get it, and honestly, I wouldn't say I was wrong for feeling that way. I've had people on more than one occasion say that they wanted to like Morrowind, but they just don't see what other people see in it. And listen, I get that. Tastes differ, and sometimes they evolve, and over the span of a couple of years and new subsequent characters and mod configurations, I grew fond of this game. I began to like it for all of its blemishes. Some would even say I started to like it in spite of its flaws, or because of its flaws, because over time, I no longer thought the combat was flawed, or the dialogue was bad, or the story simplistic. There was a beauty in that game that I didn't immediately appreciate until I was a little older and had a bit more time for the game to grow on me. Then we fast forward a bit. I had just moved out to Artesian Atlantic, also known as the LBC, Compton, just across the street from Jordan High School. Now, I was desperate for work and had just taken a job in Pasadena running a website and sales business through eBay. The year was 2006, and it was some day in March, the day that Oblivion came out. I was in line at GameStop or Electronic Boutique, I don't remember which. I'm old, leave me alone. And I picked up the special edition copy of the game with the map and the fold out and the special disc disc that apparently had some stuff on it that I never watched because what am I, a nerd? And I read the back of that box probably 20 times because despite at this point actually liking Morrowind, I was excited to play a first-person RPG with real-time combat without dice rolls. And the graphics, boy, at the time, we thought these graphics were like, you know, whoa, you know? There's like trees and grass and bloom, lots of bloom. I don't know what's up with those faces, but look at those trees. So anyway, I get home, I installed the game, updated my drivers, and booted it up for the first time. And in 3 days, I beat the game and never played it again, or even thought about playing the game again. In fact, I didn't know what happened to the case with the discs in them. It just disappeared after I moved and I never even noticed. The game was a complete afterthought because frankly, I was disappointed in it. It was a sequel to Morrowind, but it had been boiled down to its basic elements. The dialogue was improved, sure, but in that improvement, the characters still didn't seem to have personality. The dialogue was pretty basic, and what was lost because of this was all that richness of world building that I was used to. But I didn't care, which goes to show you just how much that dialogue actually mattered to me. It turns out that it actually wasn't all that important at all. The enemies were spongy and not fun to fight. They leveled with you, so you never felt like you were getting stronger. Unlike with Morrowind, it felt like you had to maximize every level up or you'd fall behind the power curve. If you turned the difficulty up, you were going to be spending an entire weekend to kill a single wolf, and if you turned the difficulty down, it was far too easy. When I finally beat that game, I didn't feel like I accomplished anything. I honestly felt like I survived something, and therefore, I just kind of forgot about the game. But in the back of my head, I always had this thought that perhaps I hadn't given this game a fair shake. I mean, even after playing it for the how-to video, I was kind of glad that I was done, and every time I would get an urge to install the game, I would just remind myself about the level scaling, and I would pause the install and close Steam and not think about it again until my YouTube revenue started to get low, and I would consider doing another video for the algorithm. Now I have a confession to make. Now this video started out as something completely different. It started out as a challenge video, more in line with the Elden Ring video I just did recently that no one watched because who does an Elden Ring challenge video about the base game when the DLC is out and no one cares anymore? So because I'm essentially the YouTube equivalent of a man on fire rolling on an oil-slicked asphalt in an attempt to staunch the flames, and after 7 years of this crap, I still don't know what the hell I'm doing, I thought, well, that last video didn't do well, why don't I do another one? So I installed Oblivion, and for the first time in years, I didn't stop the download and plan a different video because I was convinced that doing a max difficulty run of Oblivion was the right thing to do. At worst, I'd get to show a compilation of suffering. At best, I'd figure out some cool new ways to exploit the game's systems and maybe have a little fun while creating a little YouTube magic to pay the bills. I wasn't expecting or ready for what I ended up experiencing. I started this playthrough with a plan. I had a list of all the things that I was going to do because at first I was going to call the video Oblivion on max difficulty, but I can only cheese. Basically, it was going to be a video where I used every single exploit in the game to beat what I considered at the moment to be a fairly unfair experience. See, at first blush, it seems unreasonable to expect the player to fight a wolf for however long this took, let alone a human enemy, or pretty much any enemy at higher levels. On the easiest difficulty in Oblivion, the player does 6 times more damage than the enemy does to them. On normal difficulty, it's a 1-to-1. This is the true definition of a normal experience. They do a flat amount of damage to you, but on the hardest difficulty, it gets crazy because the enemy does 6 times more damage to you and you do 1/6 of the damage you normally do to them. So, you know how like on the easiest difficulty you're just running through dungeons, two-shotting enemies and standing there tanking their hits while they break their weapons trying to kill you? Well, on the hardest difficulty, it's the other way around. You are not the main character. They are. I knew this going into the game, so I tried to prepare myself for this by having a list of every exploit and glitch that the game had to offer to give me an advantage. But something happened during the early moments of the playthrough. See, my ego kicked in and I started having crazy thoughts like, what if I could just do this all straight up without any exploits? I started the game with character creation, got myself a handsome young monkey man, and started by walking against the wall for a couple minutes to level up my athletics. But as I thought about it, it became clear to me that if I level up my skills in a tutorial section, it'll be that much harder to level up speed to 100. My intention was to level up athletics, acrobatics, and sneak to 100 in the tutorial dungeon because you could totally do that. But I didn't do that because I needed to maximize my leveling so I could get the most out of my ability scores. So I decided to play it fair, and I immediately found out why so many people cheese this difficulty in the first place. It started with me hiding in the back from the attacks of cultists who were trying to get to the Emperor, and every now and then I'd get brave and try to get a hit in, but would immediately back away the moment I got a hit in and figured out that I did no damage. Then we come to the first mandatory combat sequence where rats, you know, the things about the size of a cat, break down a brick friggin' wall and start handing my ass to me like it were a tasty hamburger. I was forced to retreat to a ledge and cheese them with fireballs. Luckily, those actually do damage. But that was the end of my good luck because I died to the rats over and over again. It's difficult to aim that slow-moving projectile at a distance that's safe enough to not get hit because these rats are an absolute menace. If they did more damage, they'd be nearly as strong as a clanfear because these things can jump real far. And not only do they jump attack far, but the jump actually increases their movement speed. So if you're running away from them, no you're not, and to top it all off, they can spam it. It was a doo-doo sandwich and I was gonna have to be eating every bite because there was no avoiding this fight. The rats were gonna have a taste of my ass and I was just gonna have to find a way to deal with it. I did eventually figure out how to avoid their attacks and eventually I was able to move on, but then a terrible thought arose inside of me. I still have to fight the goblins. If the rats were kicking my ass, what were those guys gonna do? It was at this point that I knew that I was in for a lot of pain. These were just the opening few minutes of the game, and I was having to hit these enemies several times with fireballs, so many times in fact that I'd run out of magicka before they were even down to half their health. If I was going to have any chance at beating this game, I was going to need to come up with a plan, because everything that people had told me about this mode was that it was unbalanced, unfair, and it was like Bethesda didn't even care about making it fun. Now, I knew a lot of exploits in this game, everything from the constant effect glitch, duplication glitch, and so on, but I wanted to see if I could beat this game on its own terms without depending on too many glitches or exploits. Then it came time to pick my skills and head out into the world outside, but before I could do that, I needed to figure out how to survive the rest of these encounters, and there were quite a few of them where multiple enemies would surround me and punish me until I saw that load screen. But I remembered that one of my main skills was illusion, and I had access to the calm spell. If you don't know what that does, it takes an enemy, like a rat, from someone that wants to chew his way through your rectum into a docile little creature for a couple of seconds, giving you enough time to back up and riddle him with fireballs. In fact, when I thought about it, I could just use this spell and run off without having to fight anyone if I really wanted to. And that's when I realized that the hardest difficulty wasn't all that difficult if you took full advantage of the ridiculous skills the game gives you. You could charm the enemy, sure, but you could also cast Chameleon and sneak past every enemy. You could stack reflect damage until you had 100% reflect and become not only immune to melee damage, but send that damage back at the attacker. And since they hit 6 times harder, it means they could basically one-shot themselves. You could make a spell that gave you 85 armor, 100 magic resist, and a passive heal and just walk through levels while enemies tried in vain to kill you. You could even create a fatigue damaging spell that lasted for minutes turrets, and while the enemy was on the ground, pelt them with artillery. Magic gives you every tool you need to win, so it wasn't an uncertainty that I was going to beat the game, it was a foregone conclusion. But what method I chose to beat the game, that was the big question. So I thought about it. What would I need to do to ensure that I had an advantage over the enemy that they couldn't overcome without doing something lame that would negate the fun that I was having overcoming these challenges? And that's when it hit me. If I stayed low level, the enemies wouldn't be able to scale up. I'd stay low level, sure, but so would they. But unlike the enemy, I could still level my skills and get access to more and more powerful magics. In fact, if I leveled Conjuration to 100, theoretically I could cast high-level summons that the enemy couldn't hope to handle in a fight. But in order to do that, I was going to need a source of magicka. I had an idea, but getting to that goal required a whole lot of other work in order to make it even possible. What I needed to do was cast a summon, then soul trap the summon and kill it. But in order to kill it, I needed a high-level destruction spell that could breach its defenses enough to kill it in time before the soul trap wore off or the creature desummoned. And in order to trap the soul, I needed a soul gem. And to get a soul gem, I needed money. But before I could do any of this, I needed access to spell creation. And to get that, I was gonna need to do the Mages Guild quests. And that meant going out into the big, scary world where death was inevitable. Now that I had a big laundry list of crap to do, I got to work. The quest to become a member of the Mages Guild is probably the easiest to do for a character with no money, no skills, and no ability to murder, because it's mostly a bunch of fetch quests, save for a few standout quests that actually have you tracking down a murderer to do a murder on them. And the cool thing about this mission is that it sends you to every Mages Guild in the game, which means you'll be making money because you could basically steal everything that isn't nailed down and sell it. And while making money, you could buy all the spells you need from vendors. You're killing a whole bunch of birds with one big massive boulder, essentially. So it's the best place to start. Once I became a member, I got access to the Mages Guild in the capital city, and it's there that we can enchant and make new spells. But I needed money, and I was completely broke. So I figured the best way to make money would be to grab some food from the local merchants and mix them together to make potions, then sell the potions to the merchants, rinse and repeat. But if I did that, I'd level up too fast because alchemy was one of my main skills, so I needed another way to make money. I knew of two different ways to make a bunch of cash easily. If I could get a scamp summon, I could do the Black Bow Bandits quest and kill them, take their bows, and sell them to the count for 100 gold each. The bandits respawn, so I could technically farm them infinitely, but there might be an easier way. At Fort Farragut, inside Lucien LeChance's barrel, is 10 poison apples, which sell for 300 gold each. They respawn every 3 days and weigh almost nothing, so they could be easily farmed. So that's what I needed to do, I reasoned. So I went to the fort, killed some skeletons that dropped a ton of arrows, which I would need later, and picked the lock on the barrel. Once I had the apples, I went to the Westweald Inn at Skingrad and headed into the basement to talk to a high elf hanging out down there. He'll buy our poison apples for 161 gold, but here's the thing. The higher your mercantile skill, the more he'll pay for them. But how was I going to level mercantile from 19 to 100? Well, how does anything in this game happen? Through hard work, or by sticking something between your casting key and walking away for a couple hours. I went over to the blacksmith and I sold him my stack of hundreds of arrows, but I sold them one arrow at a time. This took forever, and you might be wondering why the hell you would do this to yourself, Strat.
Is this not why you are here? Are you not entertained?
Because each time you sell an item, you gain some experience in mercantile. But regardless of whether you sell one item or a stack of items, you still only get EXP once. So the best way to level mercantile is to sell each arrow in a stack one at a time. And when you've sold the entire stack, buy those arrows back and do it all over again until your mercantile skill and your persuasion is maxed. If you do this, Cinderis and Skingrad will buy your apples for around 2,700 a stack. back. After you sell the apples, you rest for 3 days and head back to the barrel to get more apples, and in no time, you'll have thousands of gold to spend on soul gems, spells, and non-magical gear to enchant. But I have a neat little trick that someone on my Twitter told me about. What's better than a set of magic Daedric armor? A set of magic Daedric armor that weighs nothing. What you do is you buy all of the bound armor spells that you can get. You cast bound armor on yourself, then cast a summon and let it beat up on you a little bit. Once the armor has taken damage and its health is below 100, use your repair hammer and repair the armor. Then, for whatever reason, you'll be able to drop that armor on the ground. If you wait until the summon spell wears off, the armor will still be laying on the ground, and if you pick it up, you'll have a free set of Daedric armor that weighs nothing. The only problem is that it breaks very easily, so you'll be repairing it a lot. That's why you need armor, so you can repair magical equipment. Then I proceeded to summon low-level enemies to fill up my grand soul gems that I bought in the Imperial City Market. Once I had enough to enchant a set of armor, rings, and a necklace, I enchanted that gear with Fortify Magicka. Doing this, I was able to get almost 100 extra Magicka, which allowed me to cast even more powerful summons and destruction spells, which in turn allowed me to trap even stronger souls, which could be turned into even better gear. But I wasn't able to do enough damage to the summons in order to trap them quick enough before they desummoned. I thought about it for a little while, and I found myself creating a sort of matrix in my head. At the top row were tasks I needed to do, and just below them were things those tasks would allow me to do. I needed better souls to make better gear, so I could get more Magicka to cast better spells. But I needed more Magicka first to cast better spells to get better souls. That's when it clicked. What if I fortified my Magicka with a custom spell and used that extra Magicka to cast my more damaging destruction spells? I tried it out, but quickly found out that it just wasn't enough. I needed a ton more damage to kill these things, not only before they desummoned, but also before they killed me, which they could do in one hit. So I created a spell that gave me extra Magicka and extra intelligence, but again, this wasn't enough. I remembered that spell effects can stack so long as you name the spell something different, so I created 2 fortification spells that gave me about 500 extra Magicka for 30 seconds, and this opened up all kinds of different options. Not only was I nuking the summons, but I also realized that I could fortify myself a bunch of times and cast a spell that would give me a max armor rating, maximum magic resist, and fortify a bunch of skills and stats to ridiculous degrees, like running across the map in seconds, jumping across the map like in Morrowind, or just one-shotting enemies with a ridiculous amount of strength stacked up. The possibilities seemed endless, and some might call that an exploit, but I call it glorious because it was at that moment that I realized that Oblivion's difficulty is not broken, it's perfect. It is not the weakest entry in the series, and it was not my least favorite. Oblivion had fortified its acrobatics and leapfrogged over Morrowind, stole my heart, and became one of my favorite games in that moment, and this is why. Oblivion sets you up as a guy. Just a guy. A prisoner, in fact. Who knows why you're there? That's for you to decide. The only thing you know is that you're unskilled and there's nothing special about you other than the fact that some old man has fantasies about you. So you're an Instagram model. As you get stronger, so too does the enemy, because like I said, you're not the second coming of a prophesized hero of legend. You're just a guy who got swept up into events that are bigger than him, who has to rise to the occasion to overcome what should be insurmountable odds. Think about what you do in this game. You break into hell and steal the devil's artifacts while bitch slapping his minions. That's not something you should be able to do easily. So the difficulty actually makes sense because you don't have any godly powers. You're just a dude. So you've got to find a way to overcome those odds with the tools at your disposal. This is no different than any other game, really. You can play max level difficulty in just about any game, and unless you know what to do, you're gonna have a bad time. But how do you, as a player, figure out the best combinations of skills and powers to help you overcome those odds if the game isn't putting up enough of a fight to make it worth your time? I mean, you have to admit, if a game is easy and you're beating it up just fine using one skill, why would you change that plan midstream and learn another way to do things unless you had no choice? That's where the developers step in with a solution. Bethesda set up a situation in this game where continuing to do the same thing you did on normal difficulty just wasn't gonna fly here, because the enemies are far stronger than you, and you just don't do the kind of damage that they can do. Essentially, it's like this. You know how in these games you'll see a guard run after an enemy bravely, only to get killed before they can even get a hit in? That's you. You're the guard. And a lot of people didn't like this because they don't want to be disempowered in a video game, especially an action RPG like this one, that previously pandered to a power fantasy. In Elden Ring, Morrowind, all you had to do was play the game long enough and eventually you became an unstoppable juggernaut. It was an inevitability because of who your character is in the story. You are a powerful folk hero, a legend. So, the power fantasy was necessary. But in Oblivion, you're just a prisoner, so you have to earn your power fantasy. It's not just given to you. If you play on the normal difficulty, you may never reach that godhood because you don't need to. The normal and easy difficulty sort of lulls you into complacency and allows you to just continue using the same tactics from the beginning of the game to the end. But the hardest difficulty makes you stop and think. I'm about to level up. That means the enemies will get stronger. So I'm going to need a fire spell that does more damage. But you know what? I'm already maxed out. Okay, well, how about if I combine the fire damage with a weakness to fire spell? And then later, when you get even higher level, you stack those effects, making even higher level enemies melt. But then you get to a point where you're running out of magicka too quickly. But if you use a shock spell, not only do you get the same amount of damage as your fire spell, but it's also cheaper to cast and leaves you with even more headroom to do more damage. Every step of the way provides you with a new challenge and forces you out of your comfort zone and into a headspace where you're constantly thinking of ways to overcome those challenges in a way that creates less friction for yourself or squeezes every last bit of power out of whatever skill you're using. Min-maxing, essentially. And that, my friends, is how a developer forces a player to use their creativity, because problem solving is the essence of creativity. For example, in this playthrough, I butted up against a problem. See, staying at level 5 and maxing conjuration made the game way too easy, and I wasn't playing the game the way it was intended to be played, so I had another problem I needed to solve. Can I level up at a normal pace and still keep up with the enemy's level scaling? It required me to theory craft spell combos and crunch numbers to get every single drop of damage out of a spell for the lowest magicka cost possible. And what amazed me was, yes, I could do this. I want to do X, but I only have Y. How do I get Z to overcome X? You have a path that continues the game, but there's a roadblock in the way. Depending on the kind of game, there could be one way around that roadblock, say a red key for a red door in a game like Doom, or several ways around that obstacle, like an item, clever use of a skill, or combining objects in the level to create a way through the environment. I need to get Y, but X is in the way. How many Z's can I put in this level that'll help the player achieve those goals? So for instance, if you were to have more than one red key in a game like Doom, what you'd essentially be doing is giving the player a choice. Do I take this path to get to my goal, or do I take this path to get to my goal? That turns the game from linear to more open. So the more options you give a player to accomplish whatever goal they're trying to accomplish, the more open your game feels, to the point where at some point, the more options you have, the more like a sandbox your game starts to feel. Those questions are what force a player to use creativity to overcome those roadblocks, and it's what the game does better than almost any other Elder Scrolls game, because it sets you up with odds that seem impossible, only to give you tools that you need to achieve achieve your goals, forcing you not only to be creative, but to experiment with new ideas to figure out new solutions you may have never tried otherwise. But like I said before, you have to want to change. You have to want to get out of your comfort zone to experience it, and sadly, that's a rare virtue. So, be a rarity, my friend. And this has been a rant from Strat-Edgy, and now that you heard it, go play some games.